I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Catherine had entered the High Court, prepared for scrutiny, whispers, and another brutal chapter in royal history. She was not prepared to hear Diana speak from beyond the grave. When King Charles rose and revealed the existence of a final private message left by the late Princess of Wales, the room changed instantly. Then he read the line meant for Catherine. The Princess of Wales lowered her head, covered her face, and broke down. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The silence that followed felt unbearable. William turned toward his wife as Charles lowered his eyes to the document. The High Court, the senior court where major legal disputes are examined and decided, had been dealing with protected correspondence linked to Diana's private records, because those papers carried memories guarded for decades. Yet the king had shifted the hearing away from law and into grief. Charles had been granted permission to address the court through a recorded legal statement supported by the sealed transcript. He read from a documented account preserved under restricted instructions, words closed for years. William listened as his father's voice changed. Catherine heard the message move beyond Diana's sons and toward the woman who will one day stand beside William. Her breathing caught. Then Charles read the sentence that broke her. Diana had written that she hoped this future woman would protect William's heart, keep kindness alive around him, and preserve compassion when the monarchy demanded strength. Catherine pressed both hands to her face. William reached toward her, but she pushed her chair back as tears escaped. The future king whispered her name twice, refusing to let her disappear inside the shock. The king stopped. His fingers closed around the lectern, the raised stand used to hold papers during formal remarks, and he could not continue. Charles finally revealed that Diana had written those words before Catherine had ever entered William's life. The timing felt impossible. Catherine looked up, stunned, while her husband stared at his father as if a locked part of his childhood had opened. Charles drew one breath and admitted something worse. A second part of the message existed. He had read it privately years earlier, but he had never spoken it aloud. William's grief hardened into suspicion. Catherine wiped her face, yet the words already sat between husband and wife, like a truth neither could avoid. But before William could confront his father over the years of silence, Catherine had to face the unbearable truth that Diana's message had reached directly into the most private part of her marriage. For Catherine, Diana had always been both distant and impossibly close, a woman she never met, yet whose absence lived inside her husband's silences. For William, the message reopened a wound he had spent decades learning to carry. And for Charles, reading those words meant confronting a voice from a marriage defined by love, pain, and irreversible damage. Inside one courtroom, 3 people were suddenly trapped inside Diana's unfinished emotional history. Catherine left the courtroom with William beside her, but the words followed them into an anteroom. The Princess of Wales, the title traditionally held by the wife of the heir to the throne, had spent years trying to honor Diana without becoming a copy of her. That mattered because every smile, silence, and public choice could be measured against a woman Catherine had never known. William understood that pressure, yet he also knew his mother's memory had shaped every fear he carried into marriage. Catherine gripped the edge of a chair and finally spoke. "Those words frighten me," she told William quietly. She admitted that Diana's message felt less like comfort and more like a responsibility she had never agreed to inherit. William moved closer, shaken, and told his wife that his mother would never have wanted expectation to crush her. To him, the documented message preserved in the sealed royal record felt like reassurance. To Catherine, it sounded like a promise she might one day fail. Across the corridor, Charles sat alone with the original transcript. The transcript was the written record of Diana's preserved message, kept under access rules because it concerned William and the future direction of the crown. The king ran one finger beneath the final sentence, then set the file down when an aide entered. He said nothing. The silence itself exposed how deeply the words still reached him. William returned to the legal papers and found something that made his expression change. A dated review note showed that Charles had personally examined the sealed message years earlier. The prince read it twice. His father had known, long before the court hearing, that Diana had written about the woman who would one day stand beside him. William felt the old instinct to protect his mother's memory turn into anger. Catherine saw it immediately. Her sadness gave way to confusion as she asked the question he had been avoiding since the reading. Why now? William looked toward the closed door separating them from Charles and realized the answer could not be found in grief alone. The answer would lead them back to one private royal ceremony, one disputed record, and the moment Charles decided Diana's silence could no longer be protected. The High Court confession did not begin in a courtroom. It began 6 weeks earlier, behind closed doors at Windsor, during a private ceremony so controlled that even senior aides were excluded. Catherine had been asked to approve the transfer of several historical records connected to the Princess of Wales. One archive box remained sealed. When its description was read aloud, William froze. Charles said nothing, and in that silence, the confrontation that would eventually explode before the court had already begun. Catherine stood beside William as the custodial review moved forward. A custodial review was the formal process used to decide who could protect, access, or transfer sensitive royal records. And this one mattered, because Diana's personal papers involved both family privacy and the future crown. Charles watched each file change hands, knowing one category concerned future holders of the Princess of Wales title, and private correspondence too emotional for ordinary archive rules. Then the archivist read the label. Final personal message. For William and the woman beside him. William stood so quickly that his chair shifted behind him. The prince demanded the box be opened. Catherine turned toward Charles, expecting an explanation, but the king placed one palm across the sealed case. Not here, he said. William's face hardened. He accused his father of controlling Diana's voice, even after her death. Charles did not answer with anger. Catherine saw something worse. Fear. The monarch lifted the archive box himself, and his hands shook for one brief moment. She noticed. William noticed too. That small movement told them Charles was not protecting himself from the unknown. He already knew exactly what those hidden words contained, and the knowledge had followed him into that room. Days later, lawyers challenged the restriction through written submissions connected to the High Court hearing. Those submissions were formal legal arguments, asking the court to decide whether the relevant passage could remain sealed. Charles read the documented challenge alone and understood what would happen next. Diana's message might be exposed sentence by sentence through legal debate, stripped of warmth and reduced to evidence. The king made his decision privately. He signed a recorded court statement confirming that he would release the relevant passage himself and speak from the preserved transcript. Charles wanted Diana's words heard as a personal message, not dissected as a legal object. Yet William knew none of this. William entered court believing procedure had forced his father to speak. Catherine believed the same. Neither understood that Charles had chosen the moment, chosen the words, and chosen to reveal them in Catherine's presence. And when William finally learned that his father had volunteered to speak, their grief stopped being a private wound and became a confrontation neither man could escape. The courtroom had barely emptied when William found Charles alone. There were no lawyers between them, no courtiers choosing careful words, and no ceremonial distance to soften what came next. The prince closed the door and asked his father one brutal question. "How long did you know?" Charles did not pretend to misunderstand. He removed his glasses, placed them beside Diana's transcript, and gave an answer that changed William's anger into something far more complicated. Catherine had already been taken to recover after the public reading, and William could still hear the break in her breathing. Charles told his son he had first seen a protected summary years before the marriage. A protected summary was a limited written account of sealed material, created so senior custodians could understand its importance without releasing the original words. That mattered because Diana's message touched William's private life and the future monarchy at the same time. William stepped closer. His anger sharpened. He accused Charles of watching Catherine carry Diana's shadow for years, while withholding words that might have brought comfort. The future king demanded to know why his wife had been allowed to feel judged by a woman who, in private, had written with compassion. Charles stood slowly. He told his son that silence had never been intended as punishment. The king finally broke his silence through that private conversation. He admitted he had feared the message would become another weapon against Catherine. Every sentence would be compared, every gesture measured. Charles believed releasing Diana's praise might trap the younger woman inside an impossible standard, so he chose protection through silence. William stared at him. The explanation made sense, and that almost made the pain worse. Charles reached for the transcript again. His voice dropped as he revealed the second passage through the documented text before him. Diana had not simply praised William's future partner. She had warned that the monarchy might one day demand emotional perfection from her, forcing kindness to become performance, and private pain to disappear behind duty. Then Charles delivered the final plea. Diana had written that William must never allow the crown, the institution and responsibilities surrounding the monarch, to consume the woman he loved, in the way royal pressure had consumed her own sense of safety. The prince's anger collapsed. He said nothing. William looked down at the transcript and realized a different question now mattered. His father had known, yes, but Charles had not acted alone. Someone had created the restrictions. Someone had approved the silence. Someone had decided when Diana's warning could be heard. That question moved the crisis beyond a father and son, because behind Diana's message stood a chain of decisions powerful enough to control when even a dead princess could be heard. Diana had written the message with emotion, but emotion was not what kept it hidden. Rules did. Signatures did. A chain of royal custody transformed personal words into protected material that could not simply be handed to William because he demanded them. Yet as Charles sat before the legal file that evening, one reality became painfully clear. The system had preserved Diana's message perfectly, and in doing so, it had denied her family the comfort she intended them to receive. Charles remained alone at Clarence's house, with the file open before him. The royal custody framework was the formal chain of legal and family controls used to protect sensitive records, and it mattered because Diana's correspondence touched both private grief and the future king. Custodians, legal representatives, and the sovereign had all been required to follow the original privacy instructions until a specific legal threshold allowed limited release. Now, as monarch, Charles held the power to support that disclosure. The king reread the warning about Catherine and stopped. "Diana," he said quietly, "no speech, no audience. Just her name." Charles closed the folder, but William's accusation returned with brutal force. Had his silence protected Catherine, or had he repeated the same cold system Diana had feared? The monarch leaned back, visibly shaken by the possibility that caution had become cruelty. Then Charles noticed a handwritten instruction attached to the protected file. He had seen the page before, but not with this understanding. The note stated that the message should be heard when duty begins to outweigh the heart. The king read the sentence twice. Catherine's breakdown, her years of pressure, and William's anger suddenly connected. Diana's warning was not trapped in the past. It had reached the exact crisis unfolding around them. Charles opened the legal authorization papers. Limited disclosure meant carefully allowing named people to hear protected material without making it public. And the decision carried enormous weight because the recording concerned William's marriage and emotional future. The monarch signed permission for the prince and Catherine to hear the complete recording in private. That was the next shock. A recording still existed. Charles confirmed its existence through the documented archive inventory and authorized access to the preserved audio linked to Diana's transcript. Neither William nor Catherine had known her voice remained with the file. The king believed hearing it might finally soften the damage created by years of silence. But Catherine received word first. She listened as the private authorization was explained, then went completely still. William expected relief. Charles expected acceptance. Catherine gave neither. "I don't want to hear it," she said. The woman Diana had tried to protect was suddenly refusing Diana's voice. and that refusal would send shock through the family before the night was over. Everyone expected Catherine to ask for the recording immediately. She did the opposite. Sitting beside William with her eyes still swollen from the courtroom, she listened as he explained Charles's authorization. Then she shook her head. Once, firmly. "I can't." William stared at her, stunned. The message that had reduced his wife to tears was finally within reach. Yet Catherine feared hearing Diana's actual voice would make the burden impossible to carry. Catherine had returned to a private royal residence after the hearing, far from the legal arguments, but not from their weight. William sat beside her and explained that Charles had approved private access to the complete recording. Private access meant only named family members could hear the protected material, and the decision mattered because Diana's words concerned their marriage rather than public duty. The prince believed the recording would comfort his wife. She feared the opposite. Catherine held a cup in both hands, but never drank. She told William she had spent years trying to honor Diana without pretending to become her. That difference mattered, because comparison had followed Catherine through every stage of royal life. Hearing his mother's actual voice speak about the woman beside her son felt too intimate, almost as though she were entering a private space never meant for her. William felt hurt. For one sharp moment, he believed Catherine was rejecting Diana's final gift. The future king asked why she would turn away now, after fighting so hard to understand the message. His wife looked at him through tears and gave an answer he had not expected. She was afraid Diana's faith in her would be greater than her faith in herself. Then Catherine repeated the courtroom phrase that had devastated her most. Diana had written that William's partner should remain gentle when the institution asks her to harden. The institution meant the royal system of duty, pressure, and expectation surrounding the family. Catherine admitted those words felt painfully personal, because she had already felt herself becoming quieter, more guarded, and more careful under pressure. William finally understood. His wife's breakdown had never been about comparison alone. Catherine believed Diana had somehow named the exact struggle she was living now. The prince looked toward the untouched recording device, but did not press play. Instead, William switched off every phone in the room. He sat opposite Catherine and told her there was something about his mother, his childhood, and his marriage that he had never fully explained. With no court, no king, and no royal officials left between them, William finally told Catherine what Diana's message meant to the frightened boy he had once been. William did not speak as the heir to the throne. He spoke as Diana's son. He told Catherine that after his mother's death, he had spent years fearing that anyone who loved him would eventually be hurt by the world surrounding him. He admitted that even during their happiest moments, part of him waited for history to repeat itself. Then he looked directly at his wife and said Diana's message had not given Catherine a duty. It had released William from an old fear. Catherine listened without interrupting. No aides waited nearby. No official voice could soften what the prince was saying. William explained that Diana's death had shaped the way he understood love, marriage, and royal life. To him, the crown meant more than the monarch's position. It also meant the pressure, duty, and public expectations surrounding the family. He had spent years believing anyone beside him might eventually be damaged by that world. William leaned forward and separated his mother's warning from royal expectation. Diana had not been placing a future task on Catherine, he said. Through the preserved message, she had been speaking to her son as much as to the unknown woman he might one day marry. The future king finally understood that his mother had feared his guilt would become its own prison. Then William admitted something harder. During periods of intense pressure, he had sometimes become distant from Catherine because he believed silence could protect her. The prince thought hiding his fear would stop it spreading into their marriage. Instead, his wife reached across the table and told him his silence had sometimes frightened her more than public criticism ever had. Catherine's confession struck deeply. She told William that criticism came from outside, but his withdrawal made her wonder whether she was losing him from within. The prince went still. He recognized the pattern immediately. As a child, he had learned to survive pain by becoming quiet, and without meaning to, he had carried that habit into his marriage. William looked toward the recording device. He told Catherine the complete audio might contain Diana's own explanation of the warning, but he made one promise: they would never hear it unless she chose the moment. The recording, a preserved audio account linked to the written transcript, would remain untouched if that was what she needed. Catherine waited. Then she took William's hand. Play it. The choice was no longer about duty, it was about partnership. Diana's recorded voice began, and Catherine did not break down again. One sentence left her completely still: love must never be protected by silence. By morning, Catherine had stopped seeing Diana's words as a crown placed upon her shoulders, and the world was about to see the difference. The public had seen Catherine cry. By the following morning, Britain was waiting to see whether she would disappear. She did not. Shortly after 10, the Princess of Wales emerged for a previously scheduled engagement. Her expression composed, but unmistakably changed. No statement about Diana had been announced. No grand palace briefing followed. Yet one small gesture outside Kensington Palace became the image that defined the entire crisis, and revealed exactly how deeply the message had affected her. Broadcasters filled the morning with the High Court disclosure. They replayed Charles's pause, Catherine's breakdown, and William reaching toward his wife, as debate spread across the country. Buckingham Palace issued only a restrained confirmation that the released passage was authentic within the royal record. The royal record meant the official collection of documents preserved for the monarchy and family history. William refused to release the remaining audio, insisting through a documented palace statement that the recording belonged to his family. Catherine listened as an aide warned that every expression would be examined if she kept her scheduled appearance. She felt nervous. She admitted it. But the princess refused to cancel. Her tears had been real, yet she would not allow one moment of pain to become the final public image of Diana's message. The aide asked once more. Catherine shook her head and prepared to leave. Charles watched the coverage alone. The king remained silent until Catherine stepped from the car. Then his shoulders eased. He had feared his decision to read Diana's words might push her away from duty or deepen the burden she already carried. Instead, the monarch saw resolve. Catherine had not returned because pressure demanded it. She had chosen to return. One newspaper captured the national mood with a single photograph of William holding Catherine's hand beneath the headline, "Diana's words reach the future." The front page changed the tone of the story. This was no longer only about sealed records or courtroom procedure. It had become a public story about grief passing from one generation to another. Then Catherine reached Kensington Palace. A small crowd began applauding softly as she paused near flowers left for Diana. The princess touched one white rose. A young woman close to the barrier quietly mentioned the late princess. "She is remembered," Catherine replied. The words spread quickly through recorded broadcaster accounts. Charles heard them. William heard them. Neither mistook their meaning. Catherine was no longer running from Diana's message. That evening she asked to see Charles privately. The crisis had begun with Charles revealing Diana's words before strangers, but it would end with Catherine speaking to him privately about the one truth those words had finally forced them all to face. Catherine entered the room without William. Charles was already waiting, Diana's transcript resting closed between them. For several seconds neither spoke. Then the Princess of Wales moved the document aside. She did not ask why the message had been hidden. She did not demand an apology for the courtroom shock. Instead, Catherine told the king she had heard Diana's complete recording. Charles lowered his eyes. What followed finally ended a silence that had survived grief, marriage, succession, and decades of royal fear. Catherine spoke carefully, but there was no hesitation now. She explained that Diana's message had never predicted her by name. It was a mother's desperate hope that William would one day choose love without allowing royal duty to destroy it. Royal duty meant the public responsibilities and pressures attached to life beside the crown, and that distinction mattered, because Catherine finally understood she had not inherited Diana's identity. She had heard a warning about pain. Charles looked at the closed transcript and admitted his failure through their private conversation. The king said he should have trusted William earlier, He confessed that part of his silence came from shame over his own marriage to Diana and his inability to protect tenderness when pressure hardened everything around them. Charles had feared repeating old wounds, yet by hiding the message, he had almost created a new one. Catherine did not soften the truth. She told the monarch she cried because Diana's warning felt painfully familiar. There had been moments when expectation made her quieter, colder, and afraid to admit exhaustion. But Catherine refused to accept that familiar pain as proof history must repeat itself. Charles looked at her then, and relief finally replaced guilt. The final recorded message had changed everything. Diana's voice had said the future of the monarchy would not depend on appearing untouched by suffering. It would depend on refusing to pass old pain into the next generation. William heard those words as a son. Catherine heard them as a wife. Charles heard them as a man forced to confront the cost of silence. Catherine asked for the complete recording to remain private. William agreed through a private family conversation, and Charles formally closed the disclosure matter. The disclosure matter meant the legal process surrounding what could be released from the protected record. Diana's intimate voice would not become evidence, spectacle, or another weapon. Catherine's breakdown was no longer weakness. It became the moment the family stopped pretending strength meant silence. Charles faced his regret. William released his childhood fear. Catherine accepted neither Diana's replacement nor her shadow. She chose a different future. Diana's final message had entered the High Court as protected history, but it left as something far more powerful: a private warning finally heard, a family finally honest, and a future monarchy determined not to inherit the same silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.